Good afternoon, everyone. We've already got some people jumping on the call. I wanted to say good afternoon. Thanks for taking the time and making the time to start to see what we're talking about when we say continuous engagement marketing. So hold tight. We're going to have a packed house today. Lots of great industry leaders on, and can't wait to talk to you soon. Hang in there. We'll be right back. Hello, and thank you for joining our conversation today about InSearchX and consistent continuous engagement marketing. We're really excited to have you on the call today, and we're going to have some great industry leaders on the call, plus all of you. So hang tight. We'll be going live at the top of the hour. Thanks again for making time. Be sure to grab something to take notes with, because there's going to be a lot of great information coming your way, and we'll be ready to talk to you after our webinar. Thank you again. We'll talk to you in just a few minutes. afternoon, and thanks for taking time to join in our exciting conversation today where we introduce continuous engagement marketing to the automotive industry. There are going to be a lot of you jumping on here at the last minute. So for those of you who are already on, grab a coffee, grab your water, and be ready to learn a lot from industry leaders Eric Brown and Phil Sura as they roll out the InSearchX Continuous Engagement Marketing Program. So hang tight, and we'll be back with you at the top of the hour. Hello, it's getting close to go time here. We're going to have our exciting conversation from InSearchX start right at the top of the hour. A lot of people are jumping on right here as we get ready to go. So get yourself in a nice quiet place where you can listen. Feel free to grab someone else that you work with so that they can hear the conversation also. There's no maximum at how many people you can include in our conversation today. So thanks so much for taking time to join. We'll be back with you in about 90 seconds. Okay, good afternoon, everybody. We're getting close to the top of the hour, so I'm going to get the cameras going live. We're going to get Phil and everyone going live. Whoops, there we go. Hi, everyone. Thanks for starting to join in. We've got a huge audience building right now, and for some reason, just a few minutes ago, the attendee list was working, and suddenly it's not. So if, as you log in, if you would just go ahead and add your name, that would be terrific. Thanks a lot. I'm gonna scooch around here. Suddenly that moved. Hi, Phil. Hi, Eric. How are you doing today?
Great. Lori, how are you?
Hi, good. Lori. Phil, where are you this afternoon?
I'm in Minneapolis, enjoying a lovely day. I think it's about 10 or 15 degrees, and we have a lot of snow.
That's awesome. It sounds like exactly where Eric is. Eric, where are you calling in from?
I'm in Boca Raton, Florida, and it's a freezing 67 degrees here.
Okay, well, that is awesome. And I'm right in between you two in Charlotte, North Carolina. So we're letting people, all of a sudden the attendee list is piling up quickly. We're going to let that go for just about, you guys all know how this goes. We're going to let the audience build just for about another 60 seconds or so as everyone's getting all set. If you have questions, we're going to have time for Q&A at the end of the conversation. And along the way, if you have a question, there is a question box right there for you. Feel free to drop in any questions or comments that you might have. This is going to be an informational discovery call for all of you. We just want you to be among the first to know out there in automotive industry. We've got a lot of dealers and agencies on already using the product, and we don't want you to wait any longer. So let's see here let's see, we've got, okay, we're rolling here now. Don't know why this attendee list is not working. So if you guys can just go ahead. Hi, Jim. Hi, Jim Kalagarakis from, are you in Toronto today? And nice to see you there. If you guys could enter just your first names, the attendee list will be visible to me afterwards, but for some reason, it's not working right now. So if you can all just wave your hand and say hi, type in your name, that would be terrific. Awesome. All right, without any further ado, it's really exciting to be here with all of you today. If you're not already on mute, let's go ahead and do that. Let's see here. I will do this. Okay, super. So we're going to talk about InSearchX today. The industry is going through some massive revolutions and disruptions happening everywhere in almost every corner of automotive. And in spite of this, the marketing costs continue to rise, and we're not seeing big shifts in dealers getting better results with the consumers. We only see dealers working harder, and we only see the costs accelerating. For all of the time and the money that we've invested, the dealer cost, the average per vehicle retailed has only gone up, crossing now over $650. We thought there might be a better way, and so we've got some industry leaders that came up with a fantastic solution for you. So welcome to InSearchX. Let's go and move beyond clicks and into conversations with our customers. Now, why do we use a header like this? Because dealers tell us they'd much rather be talking with consumers than talking about clicks. For those of you who are in the agency world, you know this to be a fact, and you know this is typically a conversation that might even have contention inside of it. So let's talk about how to improving the conversation, improve the environment for everyone, and get you back to where you started. So first of all, I'd love to introduce our hosts today. We have Eric Brown, the CEO of InSearchX, and Phil Sura, industry leader on digital and video pioneer for the last 25 years. Eric, I'd like to say hello to you first today. Hello, how are you?
Great. Thanks for having me.
Very good. So tell us a little bit about you and what your place is in the industry and what is making you walk the floors at night?
I guess, I've always been sort of inspired by data and inspired by the consumer's experience, particularly now in automotive as they engage. And so that's, how do we make the path to purchase less friction, less fear, less frustration, as we've seen Amazon and so many others do in other industries? And how do we do that in a way that is compelling to the consumer and provides value to all the stakeholders in that process?
Very good. Well, I know you did a ton of work with a breakthrough several years ago that many of the people on the call heard about, Dadium, which you successfully sold to Polk or IHS. I'll be able to talk later on. Don't worry, it'll kick in. But so tell us about that evolution for you from Dadium to what you're seeing going on in the marketplace now.
Yeah, so actually the idea behind InSearchX, the initial seed, if you will, was planted at Dadium, in that we could successfully predict what consumers were going to buy just by observing and putting math essentially to their path to purchase, to their online behavior. And well north of 80%, 86% of the time, we correctly predicted what somebody was going to buy. And it always sort of just resonated with me there that if we can predict what somebody's going to buy, then we could probably do the buying for them, or certainly help automate that path with a lot greater speed and convenience, if you will, for the consumer. So that was the first germ. So how do you do that? How do you automate the path to purchase? The second piece was just a general observation as we were collecting data and seeing more and more devices come online that we need to have data from. And as we saw the internet, become, the internet of things. And so suddenly now, we have all of our devices connected. It's not surprising anybody on the phone. It wasn't that long ago though. If you chatted on your laptop, it didn't sync with your phone, and now your phone syncs with your Alexa, your Echo, and et cetera. And so, so that was the next piece, is all of this connectivity and the ability of a consumer to essentially engage their devices to do work for them, opposed to using their devices to do work. And what's it mean when a consumer can start to ask their device to curate content and essentially build out unique experiences for them?
Very good. Well, you made a big difference back earlier in the tens and in the mid-teens, and now here we are again. we've been very fortunate to get reconnected and re-energized with Phil Sura. Phil,
Yes.
I'm going to brag on you for just a second. Phil and I were doing work together way back. I won't even say how long ago, but Phil and I shared a passion and a belief in video a long time ago, and I was an early customer, as Phil was one of, I think, probably the pioneer in video production and pre-rolls for us, and I always appreciated just a chance to work with such an outstanding, talented, committed professional in the business. So Phil, from Minnesota, tell us a little bit about why you're here today and what you're seeing going on.
Yeah, thank you, Lori, for allowing me to join the conference, and thanks for being one of the early adopters with video. And as Lori mentioned, for the most recent 15 years, I've really been involved in pioneering first video on websites. We were one of the first companies to do it on a national scale, then videos, specials, and then starting 7 years ago, we started as one of the first companies in automotive supporting Google and then Facebook and ultimately Amazon, running video campaigns on their platform. So very exciting. I love being at the front edge of initiatives. I was a spokesperson for the last group that I was involved in, and that's how Eric and I met when he was initially with Dadium. I knew he was a very bright guy from a big data perspective. And Eric, and it took me about 6 conversations before I fully understood what InSearchX was all about. And once I forced him to bring it down to a low level, I really got excited about the opportunities of really moving beyond clicks and really getting a customer from a sales, or ultimately it could be a service perspective, getting involved in conversations. And that's really why we're here today, to talk about the specifics of InSearchX. So a very exciting opportunity that I know will become a big opportunity for dealers and agencies.
Very good. And that's why you're all on the call today, because this solution, while simple in its concept, is complex. And so we thought that the important thing was that we dialogue with each of you and give you the chance to hear straight from Eric, and with filters like Phil and I to help disseminate it.
Are you saying I need filters, Lori? Is that what you just said?
I think, like, I feel like my IQ slips a few points.
I can't argue with
that. But I am a paying customer, as Phil knows and remembers, and I want to spend money. And sometimes we know that it's important, whether you're an agency right now or a dealer, there are other decision makers. And it's important that you not just hear this message, but that you can communicate it back to the other people influencing the decision today. So we're going to do our best and chip through it. And if at any point you have a question, I have questions up. You can't see it, but I have questions up on my screen. And so if I see questions come in from the audience, I'm going to toss them out here for Phil and Eric and myself. Okay, so let's go take a look. Oh, wait, a little bit about me. Who am I? I've been in automotive for almost 22 years now. I was one of those people in the industry slugging it out forever, looking for solutions, never taking no for an answer, always thinking there was something more, just like those of you that are on the call today. So when I meet people like Phil, like Eric along the path, I hold on tight, never let go, because they're going to always bring value no matter what we're talking about. So most of you that I'm seeing on the attendee list are seekers also, and you share that with me. So while I might not always have every answer, I know who to go to get the answers. And we want to help you with that today. So I started my own company at the start of this year because I want to provide those solutions like this for each of you in the best way that I can see it getting into your hands, with all the respect you deserve for your time and your efforts. So speaking of all that time and effort, let's go in forward a little bit here. Let's take a look. Eric, talk to us about this new technology, and please tell us, what is CEM?
Yeah, so the basic idea behind continuous engagement marketing is that now that we have the Internet of Things and we have devices that are connected, we now can engage consumers where they want to be engaged, when they want to be engaged, and in an environment that they have control of, and they have less fear and have more comfort in engaging. You know, I kind of use often the analogy of the stranger on the plane. You know, we often sit down and have a conversation with our seatmates, and it's amazing sometimes the stories you hear, and we share a lot of information, but at no point in that conversation did we have their email or phone or first or last name. And I ask you just to pause a second and say, gee, what if we started that conversation with first name, last name, and phone? I don't think that conversation would have gone very far. So continuous engagement marketing is essentially empowering the consumer to open a channel between them and the dealer, either based on a vehicle that they want to trade or based on a vehicle they want to buy, and then allowing them to have that conversation with the dealer on their terms, if you will. And by doing that, and we've proven this already, the conversion rate of traffic, if you will, to a dealer's into a dealer's conversation is 60 plus times greater than if we force them into a form right off the bat.
Very good. So let's go into the 3 pillars of continuous engagement marketing: attract, engage, and connect. So walk us through attract first, please.
Yeah, so attract is, I'm sure everybody on the call is fairly familiar with this. There's a variety of ways to target consumers online. Going to my past history at Dadium, a lot of that data was about how identifying the best prospects, the best click. But what we're doing here, though, is we're saying, okay, let's get that consumer, but let's attract them with a message that goes just beyond, hey, we got a great car for you, but also says we have a great way for you to shop. And that is you can engage multiple dealers from one location. You can control your conversations with those dealers, et cetera. So the attraction is not any different in the sense that how we find those consumers, but it is different in terms of the value promise, the value prop that we offer to the consumer. And as a result of that, we get a much higher conversion rate. Next is, of course, we have to engage that consumer. And so, so anytime we have a conversation with anybody, in fact, our time on this webinar today, right? We want this time to be as compelling, as concise, as clear, as productive as it can be. And often, we spend a lot of our times at the local dealership when we're tracking down a consumer, maybe a consumer that 2% of your web traffic that did submit a lead form. We're spending a lot of time sending emails and texts and making phone calls, and then less than half the time do we actually engage them. And then when we do, we're spending a lot of time sort of qualifying, right? What's your trade? What are you interested in buying? And so what we've done with this channel is it's an immediate access to the consumer because they've opened that door between their device and you, the dealership, and it's data filled. That information's already there. What car they want to buy, what car they want to trade, and so you can immediately move into how do we make this deal work for both of us and have a much more meaningful and productive conversation so they're not spending 120 days finding a car, but maybe 120 minutes.
We're going to stop right there just for a second because Phil and I have spent a lot of time with dealers out there live. And right now, Phil, I want to toss this to you and we can chat about this for a second. Right now, what is the typical dealership closing rate that you see with typical incoming leads?
Well, that's a good question, Lori, and I don't have that specific answer. But what I do see in getting involved with the Google Analytics, if the Google Analytics are set up, and I'm working with some stores specifically on that, if the goals are set up properly, there's a lot of activity tied to some of the key metrics such as sessions and bounce rate and page views and engagement. And so dealers are spending a lot of money, and what I hear, regardless of, let's say, what it comes down to on a close rate if it goes into their BDC, is that they would like to have an opportunity, and quite frankly, even stores that have done a good job of more effectively analyzing the data. The big question is, okay, we've got this information. How do we close deals? What does this tell us? We've got a 15% bounce rate. We've got an average time on site for whether it's a third-party site or paid search. We have good engagement where they're going to 3 or 4 different pages, and the time on site may be, let's say, 3 minutes. That looks good, but at the end of my month in December and the first couple weeks in January, that's not translating into actual deals, or as Eric puts it, conversation. So how do we bounce ahead? And so as I've had a chance to talk to some of the more progressive dealer groups across the country, what resonates is jumping ahead, not giving up on paid search. I firmly believe that that's a huge opportunity, and that's a common denominator, if you would, with some of the more progressive groups. But taking, let's say, some of the dollars that the dealership or the dealer group is not 100% committed to, and basically testing opportunities like InSearchX.
Awesome. Awesome.
Could add to that, Lori?
Go ahead. Please,
so
Eric.
A big part of the vision behind this too was never to have the conversation we just had. And what I mean by that is, think how much time our account managers and our e-commerce directors and our GMs and all those folks are spending having conversations about clicks. And all of those conversations, not necessarily anything wrong with them. That, the point of those conversations about clicks is, are we doing a good job of getting clicks to turn into conversations? But essentially what we're saying is, let's skip forward, as Phil just alluded to, and let's convert those clicks into conversations before they're made available to the dealer, and so that they can have conversations about cars with consumers and not conversations about clicks with account managers.
Absolutely. So what Phil speaks to is very real life. My experience with over 17 years in automotive, other more years around it, but it's frustrating too. It's frustrating measuring all of that. And people want to get back to engaging. And we've lost a lot of people in our industry simply because this engagement piece didn't happen between the customer and the dealer of record. So now let's go to Eric's next piece, number 3 on continuous engagement marketing, connect, the most important part.
Correct. So again, as I've talked to e-commerce managers across the country that have started to adopt our platform, one of the questions I always ask is, okay, you attracted somebody to your website, that click, the 2 out of 100 clicks converted into potential engagement with a lead form. And then the next thing, of course, is how many of those people did you actually connect with? And it's always less than half. And so what we're doing here is empowering the consumer to connect with the dealer. And so it's 100% connection rate, right? And we don't have to worry about bots or any of those other sort of fun fakes, if you will. And so the part here is that you can instantly, when a consumer has opened that channel between themselves and a dealer, the dealer's getting a notification on their devices, however they've defined that, and they can click a link and instantly engage that consumer. And that engagement is already preloaded, if you will, with all the relevant data about this consumer's interest and what it is they want to talk about. So again, we're not chasing, we're informing, and we're engaging.
So keeping it real for all my dealer friends out there, what Eric just kind of said was that you might be able to cherry pick your customers.
Well, there's that too. Yes.
So we'll get back to that in just a second, because I'm always looking for a way for, like, how can I do the most effective work and get the best results possible. And so let's keep rolling here. So now, whoops, hold on. Advancing this slide is so easy when you have the right thing. So let's talk about it. Even though both Eric and Phil have been spending a lot of time with both dealers and agencies, for right now, I've asked Phil to fill us in on what he's hearing from dealers as we look at the top of this screen. The reward has decreased, and the time and the money spent by all parties, whether it's your BDC agents, whether it's your managers, whether it's your marketing teams internally at the dealerships or the agencies themselves, the time and the money spent have increased. So Phil, I'd like you to speak to the dealer's perspective on what's happening right now with their marketing efforts.
Yeah, so you mentioned, Lori, at the beginning that the average dealer is spending close to $600 on the new car site. Now, and the reason I hesitated giving numbers as far as closing ratios, it's a wide range. And quite frankly, in a lot of cases, if the closing ratio is too high, I probably am not going to believe those numbers. And it depends, and it varies from dealership to dealership. I was just in a dealer group last week, a very well-run store where they're spending $300 per unit as far as total advertising, and that would probably be evaluated as a pretty decent job. So if you think of the average, and I've heard 600 a number from a number of different sources, how do you more effectively spend dollars? And again, I'd mentioned the stores that are trying to focus more and more on Google Analytics. That's a much more, or that's a step in the right direction to really determine specifically out of, let's say, all of the dollars being spent, what's actually producing any type of engagement. So if you're at the 600, 500, I would even say that for something is a lot of money potentially being wasted. So what dealers are constantly doing, and these are certainly the groups that I've had a dialogue with over the last couple months, they're looking for a more effective, streamlined way to really bypass not just getting, let's say, a 1% engagement, but actually, and not really focusing, which was part of the reason for the title of this webcast, not just focusing on clicks, but actually, from a dealer perspective, what's important? Is it just getting clicks? Is it just getting people to the website? Or is it actually opening up a dialogue with an in-market shopper? Now, I know Eric's going to talk a little bit about some of the hooks that he puts out there, if I can use that term, on if you're simply trying to evaluate a potential trade. You have a 3-year-old Honda Accord. What is it worth? And so one of the options or one of the enticements that a group has is actually identifying that store. And there are a lot of groups and a lot of dealerships that really do a good job in selling used cars that realize if they want to sell 100 used cars, they need 100 trades. If they want to sell 200, they need 200 trades. And how do you replenish that short of going to the auction, which is probably not the best opportunity for a group? So this model actually provides some opportunities tied to identifying those in-market or that in-market audience. The second part would be basically jumping ahead, going past the clicks, going past all of that, directly to a conversation as a dealership. And that's what dealers are really interested in, bypassing a lot of the work, bypassing some of the extra effort. And if you think about it in terms of, let's say, the average store from a paid search perspective, what really qualifies or what actually filters down as a lead submission. And I've heard anywhere from 1% to 3%. That's a lot of energy being focused on getting a small percentage. Does that resonate? And Eric, do you want to add, or Lori, anything to the dealers are looking for?
Yeah, very good points, Phil. And NADA reports that our cost to sale of cars, north of $600, as you referenced. More importantly, is the trend line. It's been going up every year for 10 years, and that's despite the shift of all of our marketing dollars and advertising dollars to a much more proficient medium called digital. That doesn't make any sense, right? We all moved our money to digital because it was going to be more cost effective, and yet the cost per sale has gone up. And then the data that's not in that number, one more thing, Lori, the data that's not in that number is the cost to manage that. So just like the cost of sending an e-commerce manager to a conference to hear guys like Phil and I talk, and the register and all that travel cost is not being baked into your advertising costs. If a dealer started to put in the labor and all of that energy and training into their advertising budget, then look at the cost to sell a car, I think they'd be quite surprised how much it actually is. And that's what we're trying to do here is let's stop the conversation about clicks and let's open up channels of conversations with consumers. And then when we go to do the analysis, we're not analyzing clicks, we're analyzing was that conversation with the consumer compelling, concise, and clear, and motivated that consumer in a way that they wanted to voluntarily choose to buy a car from my dealership.
Great points, everyone. And I want to piggyback on what both of you are saying. I really like Phil's word of bypassing. I've jotted it down. It's a good one. I'm going to be using it myself. But when we think about this total budget spend, right, and whatever the number is that we agree or disagree that the dealers are spending, we have to think, all my dealers out there, I would like you to raise your hands if you agree with me on this statement. The predominant amount of that budget being spent is on what? New cars or used cars for marketing? It's on new cars. So this math gets even worse when we say the marketing budget on our new cars has gone up, yet our margins on the new cars have done what? You all tell me, friends. The margins on the new cars have collapsed. So now we're looking at this open job situation where we're spending more than ever because most of the dollars that dealers are spending are to attract new car shoppers. Now, I want you to know, as I'm saying this, that InSearch X and continuous engagement marketing is for both new and used and pulling trades as well. But I want you to think about this. How bad is this budget problem really when we parse out by segment? But when we take a look at it like that, I'm seeing a lot of hands going up. Yeah, we're spending a ton of money and we're seeing less results, and we're seeing as far as like the revenue that we're pulling in. And it's also a product, I feel like this is important before we move to the agency piece here, Eric. It's also important because with the new cars, you do not have all the differentiators that you have with your used car inventory. It's you plus the customer. So how much more important is it not to just get on that lead as soon as it comes in, but to be able to engage with the customer in a conversation immediately when they could shop an exact same new car anywhere at all, anytime at all. You need every possible advantage that you can get. And this will really tee you up well in the new car space. So I want to get a couple, I'm seeing a few things from the audience here, and I'm going to pull this up real quickly. So the consumer's anonymous until they disclose their name. That's from Jim in Canada. Yes, Eric,
Right.
Can you speak to that just a little bit here? Because that's a natural question we're going to have out there. So let's
Sure.
go to it.
Sure. So the consumer, when they decide to engage a dealer, whether that's through the selection of a vehicle from their inventory or submitting a trade that they'd like to sell to the consumer, excuse me, to the dealer, that is an anonymous connection, and an ID from our platform passes to the dealer, not unlike your Mac ID or your Apple ID or anything like that, or your Alexa ID, et cetera, how that passes in the background. And so now you have that ID. But at any point, the consumer has a button right there that says share my contact information with the dealer. And so just like everyday life, you get the chance to earn that contact information by having a conversation that's compelling to them and warrants the sharing of that information. And I often kind of joke sometimes that if you're successful in selling them a car or buying their trade, you're going to get the contact information, right? So why ask for that right out of the chute and avoid ever having a conversation about selling them a car? And so the idea is give consumer control and convenience and privacy, and they will engage at much, much higher rates. Not unlike what you've seen on your own website with a chat versus a lead form, right? Just look at the difference in activity between those two environments.
Right, absolutely. Okay, very good point. And thanks for the question, Jim. We'll keep fielding questions throughout. Another question was raised or a submission was offered as far as the BDC close rates. And the thing I will touch on there before we slide over to the agency conversation, the tricky part about this is the people that are handling this traffic that you drive in, they're living typically in a bubble of 8 to 12% close rates. So we're sending them traffic, but by the time it gets to them, and those 8 to 12% close rates are typically after dozens of reach outs to the customers, which doesn't even put you as an agency in the best position possible because the customer's kind of worn out, people are worn out, and so we want to put everyone in a better position. So Eric, let's jump into the agency side because we've got a ton of agents on the call today. First of all, can I take a minute to thank all of our agencies and resellers that have reached out, because dealers on the call, you need to know that these agencies are looking for solutions to give you better results. Back to Phil's point, how can you be more effective, bypass some of the stuff that's been going on there and get more effective and connect with your customers in an easy manner. So Eric, that being said, can you take us into what you're seeing now and hearing as you're talking to agencies?
Yeah, so agencies, are sort of the tip of the spear often for the dealer community, in the sense that they're looking for new solutions that deliver better results. They're hearing not just from a dealer, but dozens, if not hundreds of dealers, what's working, it's not working. They've got a pretty good perspective of the overall landscape. And so, they're always looking for new solutions. But they have their own business struggles, right? So a solution that comes along that produces results for their dealers, but maybe doesn't cover their costs to provide those results, all the amount of account management time that's required, or maybe the amount of spend that's required in order to earn a commission, particularly if they're not billing their dealers for their services directly. So what's interesting is when you move to this conversation model versus clicks, all that time, a lot of time the dealer's spending about clicks and bots and are your Google events set up correctly, and et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. it's being spent with an agency account manager on the other side. And sometimes that conversation is productive, sometimes it's not. And so what is a productive conversation? Well, again, I'm going to sound like a broken record, a conversation about a car. And so what we're doing with agencies is saying, hey, let's move beyond conversations about clicks, and let's work with dealers and work with our platform to optimize. So take the account management time that was being spent looking at CTR and time on site and all those fun things, and let's take that time to say, how many conversations did we create? How many open channels between consumers and dealers did we create? Can we create more? And what can we do to make those conversations have the highest conversion rates possible? So moving the dialogue between the account manager and the dealer from how do we spend your money more proficiently to how do we sell cars more proficiently.
What a great place to be. And that puts the agency back in the seat of being part of the strategy and the success, even more so. So at this point, we're going to do a real quick poll. And with any luck, I'm going to launch it right here. So here we go. And we want to get your feedback right now. So the poll is open. And right now, it's for dealers and agencies alike. Answer from whatever point of view you're at. Right now, how confident are you in either your or your dealer's current ad spend? Extremely comfortable is the first answer. 100% of our efforts are completely worthwhile and rewarded. Number 2 is I'm comfortable, but I'm always open to improvement. Number 3 is we've got concerns about our ROI and our clients' return on investment. And number 4 is I'd rather not say. So we're going to keep the poll open for just a minute here. And okay, 5, 4, 3. If you're not watching now, we caught you, right? So 5, 4, I gave you another 5, 4. Ready? 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. The polling is still open. Okay, so, well, gentlemen, we have no people who have said they're extremely confident. 100% of our efforts are perfect. We've sort of stacked that there because that's probably not the truth, and we knew you all would tell the truth. We have 33% say comfortable, but always open to improvement. 50% say we have concerns, and 17% say I'd rather not say right now, which is absolutely fair. And so which goes to our next slide. So now you're probably wondering, how does this work? So Phil, I know that one of your goals for this call today was making sure that we effectively communicated the InSearchX platform. So as Eric goes through this here, we'll go point by point, and I'd like your color on the conversation too, as you've been out there working with a ton of dealers. So Eric,
Absolutely.
kick us off.
Lori, real quick, we can't see that. We just see the poll still. Can't see the slide.
Well, that's not good. So how about if I go there? Let's see. Let me close the poll out. Thanks for letting me know. Show screen. There we go. People can see your screen. It says they can. Poll is open and the poll is closed. There we go. Thank you, guys. Appreciate the heads up. It's a team.
Yay.
Okay, so now.
And by the way, this is a good example of an open communication channel between people, and no one shared an email address between us or phone conversation, but yet we're having a very compelling conversation as we speak. So imagine if Phil was looking to buy a car and Lori, you were looking to sell one, right? How much more compelling would this interaction be than chasing down an email, phone, et cetera, right?
Well, I know who they all are, but you don't know who they all are. So
yeah.
I'm going to say some real quick hellos. I won't say last names just in case they don't want to be identified, but Zach, Ron, we've got Rick, we've got, another Zach, Mike, Pete, John, Bill, Jim, Craig. We forgot to invite the girls, it looks like, but that's okay. We'll get them on the next call. We'll use a pink presentation for the next time. So thanks everybody for joining in. Those are just some of the names right now. We got another John and a Craig. There we go. So Eric, take us into this platform.
Yep. So it's pretty simple by design. One of the things I swore when I was working on the development of the product is I didn't want to teach dealership software. And I want to make it pretty intuitive that, it's just one click and they can communicate with the consumer without, having to have a webinar on how to use it. So first off, we have an always on communications channel. So that is controlled by the consumer. So again, they've engaged the dealer's inventory, or they've got a trade they've submitted that they want to get an opportunity to sell to the dealer, and they open that channel with the consumer, excuse me, with the dealer. And at any point, on both sides, they're getting the dealer, excuse me, and the consumer are getting notifications on their devices about, oh, there's a new message from the dealer, there's a new offer on your car, there's a new vehicle has been recommended to you for consideration based upon your shopping preferences. Okay, so there's ongoing communication.
Okay, so Phil, you've been talking to a bunch of dealers. What are they saying about that always-on channel?
Well, here's the opportunity, and we've alluded to it a couple times. To Eric's point, if you're a consumer, and this is hard for dealers to believe, there's going to, in a lot of cases, be some intimidation and some fear about giving right up front all of the information as to a name, a phone number, email address, etc. And what Eric has created with InsearchX is that opportunity to basically, from an autonomous perspective, submit information. I am interested in looking at a 2-year-old F-150, and I actually have a 10-year-old F-150 that I'm interested in trying to figure out what the value is. Now, to save time for the dealer, so that because there's a similar model that a lot of you are probably familiar with, where you're going to have to submit the information up front in order to get that. What InsearchX allows the consumer to do, first of all, to determine what the trade value is you can simply put in your license plate or VIN number and get the value up front. You don't have to go through any additional steps. And let's say as a consumer, you don't like that value. You're thinking, hey, this is worth 20 grand. They're only saying it's worth 5. Rather than going through, let's say, the additional step of turning that lead over or that conversation over to a dealership, the consumer would basically stop. Now, let's say that the value, the evaluation of the trade or potential trade is in line, and you've expressed interest, as I've mentioned, in an F-150. And this is why I'm primarily focused on the groups and identifying key markets. So for those of you that are with an agency or the groups, this is why it's a good fit. If, let's say it's a single point Toyota store in Milwaukee, and that's the only dealership that we have on the InsearchX platform, as that consumer, John Smith, submits the information saying, I want an F-150, but we don't have access to the Ford inventory, it's not going to be as robust or as good of an opportunity compared to the group that, let's say, jumps in, has some market share, where those opportunities, those conversations can be passed on to, let's say, a group of 5, 6, 10 dealerships within a group, or multiple dealers in a given market. So if I'm an internet director, and if I'm seeing these conversations coming through, I can pass. If I'm working at that Toyota store, and if I see the customer is interested in an F-150 and they have some type of Ford, my used car manager may not have any interest in actually evaluating or looking at that. So I can pass on that, and I'm not going to offend that prospect because he doesn't know or she doesn't know that it's been passed on. Now, let's say I'm within the same group and I see this opportunity pop up. I'm at the Ford store. That's one that I'm absolutely going to jump over or jump and get involved with. Just a side note, I visited with a pretty dominant group that's been trying to, just on the acquisition side, for 2 years, they've been trying to figure this out. And I can't, for those of you, and we talked a little bit about most of the new car spend, or most of the ad budget is spent on the new car side. That's easy to figure out. That's where the co-op dollars are. But all of you are making most of your money on the used car side, so how do you balance that? And how do you replenish and have a chance to actually look at getting good trades in an easy manner? This is a product. So getting back to the group that's been working on something similar, and this is what Eric learned early on. There are going to be a lot of people submitting leads and submitting their information, trying to get a conversation up. the stores that are going to be the most successful are going to be the ones that actually have a process in the dealership to actually identify, and Eric has the ability to put on filters. So if you're, let's say, not interested in certain types of models or makes, you can bypass those. But it's important to actually engage with those prospects that are trying to have a conversation, because even if, let's say, it's you're bidding that car right and you end up wholesaling it, that's still an opportunity to actually get in front of another prospect. So this, I threw a lot of different points out. Eric, you can probably fill in a couple of gaps. Lori, did that make sense in terms of what dealers are seeing or how they're engaged with this type of product?
Totally, and I think it's just important to share with everyone that was interested enough to get on today. We're tipping through these conversations. We're having real conversations and onboarding dealers, and the things that they've been trying to solve, InSearchX is solving them for them. But you're absolutely right. Process always wins. As long as we are helping our people, and that's why we're saying, please share this conversation liberally with those at your agency or at your dealership. But first, we've got to inform our people of what's going on, and second, we've got to have a great process. And while there will be plenty of opportunities for dealers of all sizes, if you have a group, you have an extremely nice advantage here with being able to share these leads around, and the only dealers that are going to pay are the ones, the stores that are actually engaging with the customer, not everyone. Okay, also for the sake of time, let's go to the next point. Eric, let's jump back to
So inventory. Yeah, so this was another thing that I observed back in my Dadium days, is we would see people's consideration sets, what vehicles they were considering to buy, would evolve, and we would see sometimes in the data where they actually missed a great opportunity for themselves. So a friend of mine, Tony Rhodes, who's at Gun Automotive, actually shared this concept. He says, we suffer from the fact that consumers are not professional car shoppers. And he gave this example, and that is, so first off, as a dealer group, I put all this money and energy into getting the right car and pricing it right, and then I'm spending all these advertising dollars, and traffic is coming into my website. Again, the vast majority of it's anonymous, of course. And so then they do a search for a Toyota Corolla under 25,000 in price. And so then they came in on Monday to do that. Well, 30 cars come up in that search result. Okay. Most of them are below the scroll on the web page. Well, less than half of the population, half of your shoppers will actually scroll on a page. So now maybe the perfect car for them on that Monday was below the scroll. They were one of the majority of people who don't scroll. And so they never saw the perfect car. So maybe I had a shot at getting a lead for them, but the consumer, I'm dependent as a dealer. I'm in a passive situation here where I'm dependent on the consumer to be a professional car shopper and find that car. Well, they don't, right? Now you lost out. Oh, think about how much energy went into having the perfect VDP, the perfect call to action and all that. So that happened on Monday. And so I lost out on that opportunity, okay? With a platform that's connected and always on platform, that car is being presented to the consumer on their devices rather than the consumer being tasked with finding the car. And then the other component of this was that consumer did that search on Monday. Well, what if on Tuesday your used car manager marked down the $26,000 Toyota Camry to under 25? And so now it would have come up in that search result, but they did it on Tuesday. The consumer came in Monday, didn't find the car they wanted, and they've written you off as a place they might find that vehicle. And so now there's no awareness on their part. It's like the tree fell in the forest, the price dropped in the forest, and nobody was there to see it. So it didn't really happen for that consumer. So again, in an always connected environment like this, if you update your pricing and your inventory on Tuesday, the consumer's getting a notification when that occurs that something has changed here, and here's a new vehicle that matches your shopping preferences from InSearchX.
Eric, and if I could have you elaborate on this next point, this was conversation number 3 with you, and I think it's so critical that if I'm a consumer and if I'm looking for, let's say, a 1-year-old Ford Explorer, and again, we've got that Ford dealer that would be participating, and you have access to the inventory, you have the ability, and this is what you're building out and launching, basically with AI, to identify some specific Explorers in inventory and let's say that I'm looking for a gray color, has to be under 30,000 miles. I've indicated that it needs to be at, let's say, $25,000 to $27,000. I list some of my equipment. You have the ability, getting back to your comment that most shoppers are not professional shoppers. And if you're going to a large Ford store with, let's say, 30 Explorers, it's very unlikely that the person is going to scroll through all of those options. And that's only multiplied with, let's say, third-party sites. And I'm not trying to take a stab at any of our friends on the third-party site area, but most of the inventory, the reality is only 10, 15, 20% of, at the most, of the inventory is being viewed 90% of the time on a third-party site. And what you're doing is you're matching what that consumer is looking for. And as a consumer, I'm looking at, let's say, 3 or 4 options, and I can eliminate the ones that don't fit, but I can save the ones that actually make more sense. And what you're doing is you're developing technology then to actually make it easier for that consumer to interact with the dealership. So am I stating that well?
That's absolutely right. It goes back to that original seed. It goes back to that original seed at Dadium where, hey, we can predict what somebody's going to buy. We can shop for them. If the math can predict, 86% of the time the car they're going to purchase, then we can use that same math to find the car to put in front of them and recommend to it. If you think about, the path to purchase, and anytime they visit a website, the consumer is having to learn, how does your search work? What are the ranges for your drop downs? What options do I have? Can I do color or not do color on this site? Just think about all the energy we ask the consumer to put themselves through just to find the car. And then we ask them, now scroll please and look at all these options. And now click on each one of these irrelevant to you and look at that BDP page and go through all that information. That's a lot of friction and creates a lot of frustration in finding the perfect car versus the convenience of saying, hey, go find me a 2015 and let me know, with these parameters, and let me know when you found it. Right?
Well, you guys did it. You managed to uncork, release the Kraken with the last conversation. Everyone's over here asking a ton of questions right now. So I'm just going to jump into a couple of these. I apologize for having to lean over a little bit to read them. So someone's asking about reporting. Yes, there are dashboards. We'll give you a private demo on that so you can see exactly how that works. What the sales desk is going to see, the GM, the owner can see, the heat index for that. And what we don't have time for today is it's showing you all of the additional data that will soon be available as soon as users start accruing. So that's really great. A special portal, we've got this. Co-op compliance, we'll talk about that later once that happens.
Business model, yes.
You got a big thumbs up. Pay per performance model is smart. We're going to get to that in just a second here. And so thanks, Jim, for that one. Pete's asking, how does the customer get notified if you don't have their contact information? So let's really do a touch and go on that real quickly. So so Eric, as you know, that was one of my early questions, is like, what's that customer experience like? What in the world are they seeing? I think I said it just like that, right?
Yep.
So let's go.
Okay, so I just waved at that person and I don't have their email address, right? So I'm speaking to that person right now and I don't have their phone number. Okay, and so it's the same thing. This consumer has set up an account on our platform, and is managing communication, not unlike Facebook Messenger, or you can make phone calls now through Echo, et cetera. Once a device is connected, it doesn't really require any contact information anymore, as long as those two devices have opened a channel between themselves. If anybody's used Slack, for example, in their world, that's an open, persistent chat environment where what I said a week ago is there and I could pass information back and forth. And all I know about who I'm connecting with is whatever's displayed to me on the left-hand side of that. I won't spend a lot of time on it. But the idea is the consumer has a device, they have their notifications turned on, and they've managed their notifications so that when you present a vehicle to them or you present a message to them, their phone is lighting up just like mine has been here as I've gotten different notifications on different apps. And it's telling me that Joe's Honda has just submitted a new message or a new offer or whatever it is, and I can click on that link and immediately engage that information. So, the world is all connected today. We don't need phone numbers necessarily to speak to each other.
So we've got a follow-up that. We've
Go
got
ahead,
a
Bill.
follow-up
Sorry.
to that, and they're asking, so they have to sign up with your platform. The customers have to sign up for the platform. Bill, do you want to speak to that, or Eric, do you want to take that?
I just want to add something that Eric said, and because this has been brought up by a couple groups. What if I actually say, can we have a conversation? And then the customer says, absolutely. We're not bypassing, we're not forcing the customer to stay autonomous or invisible. Quite frankly, if some consumers want to go down that path, that's great. If a dealership says, hey, I'd love to have a conversation with you, can I get your phone number? Great. What InSearchX is allowing, though, is for that opportunity for the consumer to actually get engaged the way that they want to. I just wanted to add that point because that's come up repeatedly. We're not forcing the customer to go down the path. Go ahead, Lori.
And I think it's important too that we identify that what we're doing here right now is we're jumping in and we're talking to a customer. One of my favorite words here is earlier than anyone else's. We're jumping in there before they're talking to all of the dealers, before they're out there shopping everyone. We're catching them in this moment, and we've got this engagement platform available. So it's conversational, it's easy access for them, and they've contributed quite a bit of data. But the only thing you're not seeing is their personal information. Now, for most of you who are dealers, you can do hands up again. How many of you routinely get lead information and they've provided you an email and or a phone number and neither worked? So we found that in some studies, up to 36% of the customers coming in had one or more of the pieces of information that we got wasn't helpful. And even when that happens, we know that just even connecting with customers, even when we do have their information. So this lowers the defensiveness, the friction, as Eric says, and it increases the likelihood that they'll engage and they feel like now it's time to say, hey, we're now in this very natural conversation. Of course, I want Phil to have all my information. They're actually at a point where they're assuming that you have it already. And
So
now
I had a dealer actually use this analogy. He said, oh, it's like people showing up on my lot, out in the park, out on the lot, right? When you walk out there, you're having a conversation with them, you're engaging them, right? You're showing them inventory, you're talking about their trade, and you're probably, you do not even know their name. Sometimes you might ask for their name, right? Or you don't know the name they gave you was even right, but you don't have any contact information yet, right? You're just engaged. It wouldn't be like you would ignore them. Right? You wouldn't, oh, until you give me your first name, last name, email, and phone, I won't talk to you about the car you're standing next to. I mean,
right. So let's move forward because we want this to be to really see what this total opportunity is. There will be customers who never identify themselves, just like real life at the dealership. We've got another question here. So they sign up for the platform, yes. That environment's very different than what the dealer's going to see. We'll talk about that when we're on live demos with you individually, and you'll see what the customer's seeing and the platform that they're activating to use it there. So let's go on. Eric, again, for the sake of time, gosh, we've got a lot of great conversations going. Let's go here. How dealers and agencies are both benefiting.
Yeah, so obviously it's a performance-based model. So then the great thing is we're doing all the energy, right? We're having all the conversations about clicks with our partners, and we're converting those into open channels between those users, between those consumers on the dealer. And you only pay when we open that channel as a dealer. So you're not saying, oh, I just spent $5,000 on PPC and 98% of it was a Google hash, right? So a lot of it just shows up as a hash mark on your Google Analytics versus an actual conversation. So we're just skipping forward in that and saying, hey, let's only engage the dealer and engage the dealer's budget when we successfully open a conversation between the consumer and the dealer.
Bill, what are your dealers saying when they see the, we haven't disclosed the number yet, and we're still fine tuning that right down to the pennies, but what are, we're gonna answer Jim's question here, like what are dealers saying when they hear the costs? And you can talk about the cost of when the dealer chooses to engage with a client.
Well, I'm gonna share a little bit of the cost because I know a lot of people are thinking this is 10 grand a month. Eric, you're an expensive guy, you look expensive, you've got an expensive background. And when we get into dollars, and quite frankly, sometimes to get the dealers engaged, I tell them early on, which I know is breaking every rule as a vendor, but you're paying $10 per conversation. And that conversation may go on for 2 weeks or 3 weeks and actually involve multiple discussions. So it's $10 to basically look at or to get involved in one of these consumers, either somebody interested in trading out of their car, and or they can actually, in looking at the metrics, a lot of the folks are saying, hey, I also have interest in getting a midsize SUV as an example for $20,000. You also have the ability to put caps on. So a lot of the groups, and again, I'm not dealing I'm dealing with either the most dominant dealer in the marketplace or the groups. You can put caps of, let's say, $1,000, $2,000, $3,000, and just to buy $10 by it. So as exciting as this is, and I know this with the modeling and the pricing modeling that Eric laid out, this is going to really accelerate dealers getting engaged, because they have to find a small budget to basically test the model without any setup fees, without any contracts. And so what Eric has created is an opportunity to really go to the next level. And hopefully we'll have, and I'll just share this. And Eric was the one that shared this with me with Google. If you look at everything that they're doing with Google My Business, and I'm personally helping dealers with that, huge opportunity from an organic perspective, and that's a different WebEx. And if you're not looking at your Google My Business account, you definitely need to take a look at it. Part of the reason that they're putting so much focus is a lot of this is moving from a Google perspective to a voice activation using Siri. Hey Siri, give me an idea as to what the availability is with dealers near me with a 2-year-old Acura or whatever. What Eric is doing is kind of going down the same path, where ultimately, and this will sound scary to some of the dealers, the website is going to become less important for all the reasons we've mentioned. Consumers are not professional shoppers. They don't want to scroll through and look at 300 options. And this is basically going down a parallel path, a little different. It's not going to be voice activated with Siri, et cetera, but it's going to allow consumer engagement and to allow the consumer to basically have options and to roll it out and allow them to get involved with the retailer once they're ready.
So there's a lot more that we're going to be able to talk about. And you can see, and I've got tons of questions here.
Just getting started.
Pardon?
So we're just getting started, and then
started, and there's already this much excitement in the market happening. We're in several cities across the country in a big way already, and we wanted you all to know. So there's always on engagement marketing, cheaper for the dealer. Let's just say the word cheaper at $10 a choice. You can make a good choice, a good task for. This is on here or not. A less effort for agencies and dealers alike. Remove some of the contention even between agencies and dealers. And let's go back into what we started. Let's start having conversations with our clients and not having all of these analytic studies on what's happening. And we got this personal handwritten note from our dealers saying, we'd like to get back to conversations about cars with our customers instead of conversations with our agency about clicks. And there are 2% of the dealers that they'll never jump the ship, but that's okay. We're planning on that anyway. But Phil and Eric, let's take a couple questions from the audience, if that's okay. And then we're going to close down because we are at the top of the hour.
I want to mention one more critical point. If a dealer is interested, let's say that you're involved in a market where InSearchX is engaged and you want to test the waters. Eric has created an opportunity for you as a dealer to turn that on where you can see what the messaging would be, and you don't have to go active. You're simply making your inventory available, and you can test on your own and see what the engagement would actually be. Now, if you're in a market where you would be the very first one, we would have to wait until we get a few other stores to make it worthwhile. But with InSearchX, Eric's made it very, very easy for a dealer to basically get involved. As mentioned, 0 setup fees. And if you simply turn your inventory live, you can watch the messaging yourself and ultimately make a decision, hey, this looks like an unbelievable opportunity. I'm going to activate my account. So key point for those of you that are saying, hey, this kind of makes sense. What are the restrictions, and how can I kind of validate what these guys are saying that it's actually going to work for me?
Very good points, Phil. We've got someone asking about an agency, like how do they test this right now? Eric actually came up with, we'll touch on this real quickly, a challenge for them to take 20% of their current marketing spend for efforts like this with digital efforts and place that on CEM. Very low risk, very high volume. We can show you that model later on a personal phone call, but really good conversation, great observation, like how do you start small? Especially considering that the dollars aren't going to be incredibly high anyway, but get maximum result and proof points for the other people that are on the team with you. So Eric, time for closing comments.
Yeah, so what I would say about that is, having started a few companies and grown them and, had successful exits, the same principles we're using to attract consumers to conversations about cars with dealers are the same principles we're using to engage agencies and dealers. And that is, we want to minimize the friction, minimize the fear, minimize the risk, and make this really a no-brainer for you to get engaged. So I encourage you to have a conversation. We will make it work. And then we're doing that same thing on the consumer side, where we're eliminating the friction in the conversation. We're eliminating the fear of engaging a dealer when they're not quite sure what to expect there, and we're making it easier for them to source the cars and make their trade available. Same scenario. So that's we're here to provide I think it says a revolution in moving from clicks to conversations, because ultimately we sell cars with conversations about cars, not conversations about clicks.
Fantastic. Well, there's a lot of passion in the room, and we're really glad we've literally got people from every corner of the country and even Canada on the call today. I'm going to flash the screen that shows you contact information on all of us here. So right here, next slide, right here. So each of you probably saw or heard from Phil or Eric or I. Feel free to reach out to whomever you'd like. Any one of us can help you. If you've got more questions, that's natural. If you're ready to sign up, that's natural also right now. And then we'll get you started again, like Eric said, with as little friction and as much opportunity as possible. So Phil and Eric, on behalf of both of you, I'd like to thank everyone for jumping in so quickly, adjusting your schedules. We trust this has been a good use of your time, and we're excited to get the conversation started with you about conversations and not clicks.
Done, Lori.
Pardon?
All right.
Nicely done, Lori.
Okay. Have a great day, everyone.
Thank you, Lori.
Thanks. Okay. How is your screen?
Lori, I'm going to